Okay, so for everyone who's listening, this is the therapist Polly Crabtree, who is what you're a specialist in burnout, but you work in particular with women who are carrying the burden for their families. Don't
Yes.
you? Yes. So maybe if I hand over to you, you can kind of fill in some of the bits I've missed out there and explain some more about what you do and specialize in.
So I guess it's something that's kind of come over a period of time. I initially started working with stress at work, which then gravitated, I think, quite naturally into people who are experiencing burnout. And then I found that over the course of time, I was beginning to see more women who carry this mental load for their families, and are trying to work at the same time. And that tends to be the kind of persons, they don't necessarily come to me with that as their issue, but that will often be the context in which their lives are set up. And sometimes they are parents and sometimes they're not. And it's and also parents of different age children. I found that I see people with primary school age children and then teens and grown-up children, but it tends to be this kind of almost an overdeveloped sense of responsibility for other people and a concern for making sure that everyone else is okay, which often has the effect of actually them not necessarily always being okay.
Okay, so overdeveloped sense of responsibility. And are there other kind of common features you see in a lot of these women?
So they will often be people who find it hard to say no. So they will sort of, they might be that person that you think, oh, they're really busy. How on earth did they take on, another thing to do? But they find it complicated to say no. It creates a sense of discomfort within them. So they will often say yes, even though they're probably aware that they don't necessarily have the capacity for that. And that will be yes in all sorts of areas of their life, not necessarily confined to one area. They'll often have difficulty sleeping because their mind is constantly whirring, and really this feeling that they don't have time to put into place any of the support features that they might want in their life. So they often won't have hobbies but will feel guilty about that. They might feel guilty if they ever do have to say no to something because they literally physically cannot do it. So those are the kinds of things that I will see. And I guess the other thing that often happens is over apologizing. So if they do feel that they've done something wrong, or that is wrong in terms of their kind of personal protocol of how they like to do things, then there will be apologies for that.
So kind of overdeveloped sense of guilt that has come from somewhere
Yes,
along the line.
absolutely. Yeah.
So in terms of working with this, are there certain strategies? Is it one size, like, do you do something different with every single person, or are there certain things that a lot of women have found helpful?
So because I'm an integrative therapist, I tend to go with the approach of tailoring my work to each individual as to what they bring. So I work with three particular theories that I was trained in as my core, which are the person-centered transactional analysis and CBT. Although I would probably say that over time, and because of some additional studying that I've done, I've replaced CBT with psychodynamic. So really what that means is that I'm looking for the patterns of behavior within people. So I think that we start off perhaps in the same way, in the kind of down the same path. So I look at getting people to observe and acknowledge their own behaviors, to recognize what's going on for them. So that's usually a big part of the initial work, but then that will kind of spread out. And I'll start cherry picking what feels like would be a good way of working with each individual person, but definitely pulling them into a space where they have more capacity, I suppose, to look at themselves and actually begin to spot their own patterns of behavior. I think that really works for people to go, oh, okay, this feels different over here than it does over here, but actually if I take a step back, I can see that the same thing within me is driving me to behave in that way. So they might feel, I guess, that there isn't a pattern until they sort of pull back. And so we spend a lot of time sort of getting really detailed over quite small things, because that tends to pull the pattern out for them.
I see. It's like a kind of microcosm of their
Yes.
whole approach to life. Yeah.
Yeah, very much so. And I think that sometimes that can feel, for people, that can feel that can go on for a while. And I think there is some of this piece as well when people first come to therapy. So I tend to work quite long term with people. It tends to be, sometimes it's short, but generally it's medium to long term work. And that whole first piece is around this acknowledging what's going on, but also clearing things that are, I almost think of it like using the analogy of a forest floor. And we're clearing the leaves from there before we can then go down and do the deeper work. So there does tend to be a case of people bringing what's going on in their everyday lives initially, and we kind of work through those things. And then it's about going deeper into the sort of more aspects of the personality and looking at the patterns. So we're establishing that in the beginning while we're clearing the surface, and then we go deeper.
Okay, so is there a sense of almost starting in the present and then maybe moving back into the past in order to see how it bears on the present? And
I think so. When I do my assessment, well, not assessment, when I do my phone, I do like a sort of 15-20 minute phone consultation with people for us just to get a bit of a feel for whether or not we think that we would work well together. And when I do that, I will talk to them about kind of the way that I work and be very clear that I do look at childhood, because for some people that's just not what they want. But I always come at it from the present. So it does have that tendency to be the present piece that we begin with. And then it moves on to sort of the digging around sort of into the past a little bit more for those patterns. Because I think that that initial piece where people are kind of feeling me out and seeing whether or not they feel they can trust me, whether it feels like a safe pair of hands, you know, that is an important sort of relationship building piece, I guess. And that the present sometimes feels more comfortable at that stage of the relationship than going into the past. So sometimes we'll go there if it's pertinent, but I tend to tread a bit more carefully there until people feel that they're really comfortable. And I can generally tell the point at which someone is beginning to settle into the sessions and feel less perhaps vulnerable and exposed than they might have done at the beginning.
That's true, because it can feel very exposing and also a bit contrived almost if you try and yank somebody back into the past too quickly before they're ready for it.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I think that can be really uncomfortable. And if someone feels like, well, I'm not sure whether I've sussed you out and feel that you are the right person for me, if you take them there too quickly, then that can be a red alert for them.
Yeah. And can I ask what kind of challenges you've encountered while doing this?
I think that's probably what we've just talked about is one of them, that, you know, learning as you go, that actually too much too soon isn't helpful for people. So I suppose that's a challenge, because sometimes you'll get people coming and saying that they want a solution, that they want a solution fast. And that probably means that I'm not the right therapist for them, because I do tend to work at a slower pace. And I want to give them that a sort of capacity to stretch. So I suppose over time I've learned that that's something that we need to talk about at the beginning, you know, that actually this work can take quite a while, and is that something that they want to commit to and that they feel comfortable with. So yes, so that can be a challenge at the beginning, is trying to make sure that we're right. So one of the things that I do with people is that I will work with them. We kind of make an agreement. We'll work for the first session, see how that goes, and then we do another 6 sessions and see where we're at. And that tends to kind of resolve that challenge, that whether or not people are feeling comfortable and actually getting things moving at the pace at which they want them to. So pacing is one thing. I think another thing is that it can be really difficult for my clients to feel that they can give the time that's required, because they are really busy people and life is moving at a really fast pace for them. And so trying to get people to slow down and to understand the difference between, I'm not really sure how to term this. I'm going to say good and bad distraction is useful, because I do find that people can often be very distracted by the busyness of life, and so that can be a challenge, and we work together then to sort of look at stuff that they feel comfortable doing. So I will look at, do you feel comfortable with working in a sort of more mindful way, or putting mindfulness practices into their day-to-day routine? Do they feel like things like, would yoga be something that would help them, or going out for long walks? So we'll search for something that feels like that will give them a little bit more headspace, but that will often then be the first thing to go if their capacity becomes more limited. And I find that's quite challenging, both for me and for them, because they can see that it's a solution that will help them, but because of this overdeveloped sense of wanting to support other people, they will often come last on their own lists. And so the therapy can sometimes feel a little bit stuck, and we have to then work with that stuckness as to, why does this feel like it's not moving, and what is it that is holding you back from prioritizing yourself, or not even prioritizing yourself, but just putting yourself on a level pegging with other people in your
It's
life.
one of those catch-22s, isn't it? Because there are certain things that will help them to put themselves first on their list, but then because they don't put themselves first on their list, those things are the things to go. So,
and there can be a sense as well, I often hear from people the expression, I don't want to drop the ball, or I drop too many balls, and that they have this feeling of life being very finely balanced, and that any little additional thing is going to tip them into an imbalance. And that, I think, people find hard, because they're almost like, I'm just about nailing this, but it becomes quite rigid because nothing can change, and then something does change and upset, because obviously life throws those curveballs in, and people can find that really difficult to manage.
Because there's that very precarious balance.
Yeah.
So. Okay, well, Polly, thank you so much for sharing some of these things with me. It's been fascinating to talk to you about it, and a pleasure to meet you as well. So thank you so much.
Yes, you too, Hannah. Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed talking to you.